everybody, to the inaugural edition, the debut edition of Injury Report Live. This is week 2. I'm Steve Buchanan alongside Megan Townsley. We're going to be here every week at Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, to give you the latest and greatest injury news, what to do, what not to do, maybe look at some daily fantasy, maybe look at some sportsbook angles, everything that you want. I mean, it's Friday the 13th. If you want to drop some, what horror movie should I watch tonight? We can do that too. This is no holds barred here in this show. We'll try to stick to football, but sometimes, we'll deviate a little bit here and there, but plenty to get to this week, Megan. We kind of did a run through last week. It was super easy because it wasn't a lot to talk about. And now the sheet that we have for the injuries we want to hit upon is like an encyclopedia already here in week 2.
Unfortunately, it's just going to keep getting worse. But is there anyone, I just want to start with, is there anyone that you think that people need to know right off the bat to prepare their lineups for this weekend? Let's start with a big name that we should get into.
Sure. Well, let's do this. Why don't we start with a game that has 2 significant injuries? I think that's the best way to start with, and that is going to be the 49ers and the Vikings game. So we got 2 big injuries in that game we're going to start with. We obviously have Christian McCaffrey on the 49ers side, still kind of up in the air if he's going to play or not. I guess they were really kind of describing this Achilles injury as one that, might feel great on Thursday, but he'll wake up on Friday, start to have a flare up, and it doesn't feel as good. And then on the other side of the ball, we just got word probably about 45 minutes ago that Jordan Addison is officially going to miss this game as well. So let's start with that one there. And let's obviously start with McCaffrey because, if you're looking at your daily fantasy lineups or whatnot, of course, McCaffrey is one of the most expensive guys on this slate. So if he doesn't go, obviously that means Jordan Mason. But Megan, I think it's fair to say that this isn't the easiest matchup for either McCaffrey or Jordan Mason because Jordan Mason is going to probably be the free square in a lot of daily fantasy lineups because he's very cheap. Obviously, volume is king, but I would say that this isn't the best matchup for him against the Vikings that has been pretty good against the run.
No, I really don't think so. And I kind of want to shout out going into what you just said about the Vikings being good against the run. Dallas Turner got a sack in that first game. So even though the Vikings are dealing with a lot of injuries on the defensive front and their linebackers as well, they do have some young guys that are able to stop the run. They did play against the Giants, who their offense is not one of the best we will see in the league. They only had 14 rush attempts against the Giants in week 1 and allowed just 45 yards. But even though, the Giants aren't the best still, that's kudos to the Vikings D-line and their linebackers able to get that done. So do I think Jordan Mason is a good spot here? No, because also his ownership is probably going to go up very high because, like you said, he is a very cheap buy on daily fantasy. So I honestly would probably avoid Mason in this matchup. But what do you think about that?
So when it comes to building a catch game lineup, Mason is going to be the, like I said, a free square there. 5,200, you have to put him in there because he's going to see a lot of touches, right? The touches were there in week 1. They should be there once again here in week 2. For a tournament play, if you're playing these large GPP tournaments, he's an interesting fade and maybe going to somewhere else kind of in that same price range. Because when you're looking at that price range there, Jordan Mason jumps out at you at 5,200. But I look at someone maybe Zach Moss, and we'll talk about the Bengals here in a minute because they're going to be missing some key guys as well. But Zach Moss is going to be in a situation where the Bengals are going to be without one of their top receivers in T. Higgins. And they weren't efficiently able to move the ball last week against the Patriots, who had that massive upset against them last week. Survivor pools are in shambles this week because half the field is already out because the Bengals were lost in week 1. So half the field is already eliminated in the survivor pool. Didn't play survivor pool this year. Glad I didn't because I absolutely would have been on the Bengals. But someone like Zach Moss might be an interesting pivot away from Mason in their week 1 tournament lineups here. So just something to consider. On the other side of the ball, talk about Jordan Addison. Like I mentioned, we just got word that he is going to be out this week. So that means obviously a lot of Justin Jefferson, which there would be anyways. But Naylor is probably going to be stepping into that wide receiver 2 role, which we kind of saw last week too as well after Addison was ruled out in week 1. He's interesting to me because, again, the price point is very nice when it comes to daily fantasy. But when you look at how they ran once Addison was out last week, Naylor only ran 2 less routes than Justin Jefferson once Addison was out last week. They kind of played him all around the field. He had 19 snaps out wide, 6 in the slot, 1 in the backfield. The 49ers secondary is okay. I wouldn't say it's, they're not a barn burner. They're not bad. They're probably about league average here. So what do you think about for Naylor this week now that Jordan Addison is out?
Yeah, and I'm going to be completely honest. I don't like Naylor in the spot specifically because last week Sam Darnold was only pressured 5 times and on
Sure.
19% of his dropbacks. So Sam Darnold started 12 for 12 last week, and we were probably not expecting to see, okay, this guy's now coming in his 6th, 7th year. Like, now, what's Sam Darnold going to do? But he started off pretty well. I mean, again, going against the Giants that don't have the best pass rush, so they only were able to get 5 pressures on him. But you're going against the 49ers, who that's what they're known for. I mean, Bosa, his pass rush win rate last week was 33%, and he only played 53% of the snaps in that game as well. So I am fading the Vikings in this situation. The Niners, even though they are dealing with some injuries, they're a juggernaut. I just don't think it's worth it, really.
Yeah, Naylor only had that one catch last week. He did catch it for a touchdown, 21 yards, 9.1 DraftKings fantasy points in that matchup. But again, getting that full-time role this week will really catch a lot of people's attention and for how cheap he is. So don't be surprised if his ownership, especially his projections, continue to climb throughout the week. Okay, let's move on here. I just want to do a little couple news items that we got here too as well. Not really significant to this week, but ones that will have kind of ramifications down the road. Marquise Brown. By the way, I was looking for Marquise Brown on DraftKings and he wasn't popping up. He is listed officially as Hollywood Brown. Did you even know that? Because I didn't even realize that.
No, that's news to me. Breaking news, I guess. I didn't know that.
I am positive if we looked up his birth certificate, it would not include the word Hollywood. But apparently, Marquise Brown does no longer exist. It is just Hollywood Brown. So a little note for you to know. But anyway, so he has officially been placed on the IL. Andy Reid said this is not like a couple of weeks that he's going to be out. This could be a couple of months. So that really doesn't change anything from what we saw from the Chiefs last week, because obviously he wasn't active, but it does bring up something to think about down the line if something happens to Rashee Rice. He kind of has that dark cloud hanging over him for the, the off-field stuff that happened during the offseason when he was racing, I think it was, on the highway. But at least for now, it is going to be Rashee Rice. It is going to be Xavier Worthy. It's going to be Travis Kelce moving forward for the Chiefs. I'm guessing the Marquise Brown news or Hollywood Brown news doesn't do anything for you right now, but I just thought it was worth kind of bringing up because this is someone that we're not going to see probably at least maybe till November or December.
Yeah, no, I don't really have any more notes on this other than the fact that the Chiefs can get it done with really any offensive weapons that they have. Even Noah Gray had a couple of nice receptions for, I think, about a little bit over 20, 30 yards in that game. Worthy had a great rookie debut with 2 touchdowns. You can even get him for plus 135 anytime TD score going up against the Bengals this weekend. So the Chiefs will be fine. Can we ever say that Mahomes is not going to be fine? I don't think so. The Chiefs will be fine.
Without a doubt. Another one I wanted to bring up was Derek Brown for the Panthers. Now, obviously, he is on the defensive side for the Panthers, and he was probably one of their best defenders all around. He was one of their better pass rushers. He was by far their best run blocker, and he's going to be out potentially for the season. That is going to be something you need to know moving forward, because him being out is going to do so much for opposing running backs coming up. And what better time than to face the Chargers, who basically scooped up what the Ravens had the past couple of years. They have Gus Edwards, they have J.K. Dobbins, and put them in a unbelievable spot here against the Carolina Panthers. Because if we see whatever we saw again from the Panthers in week 1, and more specifically Bryce Young, this is going to be a massive spot for the Chargers and the running backs here. You kind of see some of the lines here, the over-unders here. J.K. Dobbins, 56.5 rushing yards. Gus Edwards, 45.5. It really was a 50-50 split last week, Megan, but it was Dobbins who had the big runs there, 10 rushes, I think 135 yards that he had last week. Do you take preference to either one of them, or is there one that you're kind of leaning towards right now?
Definitely. I gotta roll with J.K. Dobbins. Also, it's good to see a guy who was coming off of such past terrible injuries, another Achilles last year, and to have such a great debut coming back in week 1. I mean, 10 touches on the ball, 164 yards for a score. He averaged 3.5 yards per attempt as well. I love him in this spot. Also, not only because of that, of course, sad loss from Pro Bowl Derek Brown, but also rookie Joe Alt is just being an absolute menace on the front line in the trenches for the Chargers. I mean, he only allowed 1 pressure against the Raiders last week and just completely made Max Crosby a non-factor in that game. So you pair that impressive offensive line play with The Panthers, who, got taken down 10-47 by the Saints. I love this matchup for him. He's only 5,400 on DraftKings. When you're building your lineup, that's the first guy I would go to.
And this line has been moving. It was 4.5 in favor for the Chargers yesterday. It's up to 5 now. I would not be surprised if this kind of continues to move up, especially up at least to 5.5 at some point here. But looking at the anytime touchdown props for Dobbins, for Edwards, for any running back moving forward, go through your calendar, go through there and remind yourself on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, take an anytime touchdown score for whomever is the running back for the other team, because this Panthers team, like I said, if it looks anything like it did in week 1, they are in for a world of trouble, especially not being able to stop the run. So there are your lines there for anytime touchdown score. Dobbins and Edwards basically separated here by 15 cents, plus 145 for Dobbins on the anytime, 160 for Gus Edwards. So just keep that in mind moving forward. Okay, let's get to some of the more actionable injuries that we have here. I want to get to the Browns and Jaguars. We got word that David Njoku has already been ruled out. He's dealing with that high ankle sprain, was ruled out very early, which usually is not a good sign, but designated as week to week moving forward. If you remember last year, Megan, Njoku was an absolute force in this Browns offense, specifically when Joe Flacco was under center here. Like, they were just, the connection that those two had was unbelievable. I think Njoku was averaging over double-digit targets per game when Joe Flacco was under center. It started to go that way a little bit with Watson, but now he's going to have someone he's very, very familiar with as the tight end 1. That's going to be Jordan Akins, is going to be the tight end 1 for this game coming up this week. I think Akins is a really interesting target here for me for daily fantasy. Once he got into that game, was only targeted 3 times, caught 2 of them for 27 yards in week 1 there. But this is someone that Deshaun Watson is familiar with. That offense needs a spark from whatever the hell we saw last week. There was so much, trash being talked about the Browns offense, rightfully so. But this offense needs a spark. And I think that, maybe Akins isn't that big yards after the catch guy or anything like that, but I think he is a trustworthy target in the red zone for Deshaun Watson right now. And that's really kind of what he needs at this point.
I agree with you. I think that would be a good kind of connection for Watson, who's really struggled in that game last week. I mean, 53.3 completion percentage, just 169 yards through the air, 2 picks, and he was pressured 25 times in that game as well. But he just was not able to complete passes over 10 yards. So you get a guy like Atkins who can be reliable in the end zone, hopefully in this game, because another injury to note is the fact that the Jaguars secondary is also pretty injury prone. They just added quarterback Tyson Campbell to the IR. So he's going to be out probably till around October 13th, around there. So you think about red zone targets. I do like him in this matchup. But speaking of someone that I would not want to play, who I'm fading pretty aggressively, is Amari Cooper. Because when you're thinking about Njoku with splitting those targets, Amari Cooper literally had 9 targets for 2 receptions, 16 yards, 3.5 fantasy points last week. So I'm honestly blaming this on Watson's quarterback play because it was so atrocious, and I don't see it improving very much. But I guess in this matchup, we'll give you one guy that we do like in Atkins and one guy that we don't. I don't know how you feel. I don't. I'm fading Amari Cooper.
I mean, I will say that, Dallas's secondary, is a tough matchup. So I'm not putting the blame completely on Amari Cooper, but this is someone who, even with the bad play last week, only dropped $200 in terms of salary on DraftKings this week. He was $6,400 last week, drops down to $6,200 this week going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not looking to play him at all. I'm with you here, especially when you look at some of the guys that are in that realm of where he's going to be. You got Chris Godwin going up against the Detroit Lions and what's expected to be one of the highest scoreless games of the week. You got Brandon Ayuk in the mix there as well. Michael Pittman Jr. is only a couple $100 more expensive going against Green Bay. Another good matchup there too as well. So I'm with you. Amari Cooper is going to carry very little ownership this week, and that's not a bad thing because I don't think that he's going to be giving me anything this week. So fading Amari Cooper, I am completely on board with you there. One thing I did want to note too as well is that going back to Jordan Akins there, is that Jacksonville was one of the more generous teams to opposing tight ends dating back to last season. Almost 13 DraftKings fantasy points per game, 74 catches on 117 targets last year, just under 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. So if you are looking for a cheap tight end, I think Jordan is going to be your man there. Let's get to the Bengals. I don't even know where to start with the Bengals at this point. Did you see, by the way, Higgins defending himself that he's not faking this injury? Did you hear about this?
Actually did not. Please
It's
enlighten me. I need to know more.
so
Whoa.
T. Higgins went out the other day to defend that he is not faking this injury. So he obviously has been hearing the chatter that he's faking this injury. So he said, quote, "I just don't understand why fans think I'm faking an injury. When from me to get an extension for a contract, because this is what a lot of people think this is all about, the deadline is over. I just don't understand why they think I'm faking an injury. It doesn't make sense to me." This is the state of the Bengals right now. They can't get it done with Jamar Chase. They got all this controversy going on with T. Higgins, and now it's looking like T. Higgins is on the wrong side of doubtful at this point. So we're going to be bringing out our random carousel of characters at wide receiver this week for Joe Burrow to throw to. Now, people are going to look at the results from last week, which were atrocious, by the way. There's no way to defend that. But I think people also fail to realize or fail to remember the Patriots are going to be very good defensively. You can say whatever you want about them offensively, and that is, I will not go against you for that. But the Patriots are going to be very good against the pass, and we saw a lot of that last week. Now they're going up against the Chiefs, a team that also is going to be very good against the pass, even without Snead in the mix anymore. So this is a full fade on the Bengals for me, with the exception of probably, going on the ground here. I think that's the only way that I would play any type of Bengals at this point, because obviously I like what we saw from Zach Moss, even in the limited touches that he had. 9 carries for 44 yards against New England, had that touchdown, caught 2 of his 4 targets for an additional 17 yards. Chase Brown is in the mix too as well. Wasn't overly involved, more involved catching out of the backfield, but Zach Moss is probably the only guy I'm looking towards, even with the value that you're getting with the Bengals receivers here in week 2.
Yeah, and I kind of want to go back and touch on that point of the fact that people are complaining about Higgins faking his injury. I need the fans to remember that the Bengals have, this is not me defending them, they have not won a week 1 game since 2021. Joe Burrow just does not play well in week 1. And again, that's not defending him. That's just stating a fact that they've not won a week 1 game in a long time. So in that case, I also am going into this matchup against the Chiefs, which unfortunately they have to face the juggernauts in week 2. I am not liking this matchup, even though the Chiefs D did allow the 5th most passing yards in week 1 to the Ravens, who do have, a high-powered offense as well, 267 yards through the air to the Ravens. But let's talk about those wide receivers and kind of why I'm not liking them. Jermaine Burton,
Sure.
0 targets in that game versus the Patriots in week 1. Andre Iosivas, 3 receptions, 26 yards. So when you're going up against this Chiefs defense, who are just so good in honestly every metric, even though they did allow over 200 yards to the Ravens, I'm not liking it. I agree with you on Zach Moss. What's his price? Can you remind me his price again?
Well, I have to give you some accolades first.
Okay.
You nailed Yoshivas.
You
nailed it. And I probably just said it wrong too. You nailed it. Because I made a point, because I was like, oh crap, this is probably going to come up at some point. And I made a point to go and listen to it. And I wrote it down and I left the pronunciation upstairs because I totally forgot to bring it down. And then I heard you say it. You nailed it. That is,
can you tell I practiced?
Right. So, yes,
that one.
You have to on these things. People will pick apart anything. So if we said that wrong, these people don't know what they're talking about. Game said the last thing. Nailed it. So if anybody complains about that, no, you absolutely nailed it. Sorry, what was your question? Who were you asking?
But what is Zach Moss priced at? There we go. Okay, 5,600. I like that price. I'm rolling with you. I'm rolling with you on this one. Yeah, that's a good spot for him.
And especially too, because he obviously dominated in the carries. They were pretty split on the catches out of the backfield, which I'm expecting is going to happen here. So Zach Moss and Chase Brown can do both, but I do believe that Zach Moss is the preferred target in this one here. So I would roll with Moss over Chase Brown. So that is just kind of my opinion on that, but still a lot to kind of sift out with the Bengals here. They have a legitimate shot at starting 0-2. Which is shocking, because 1-1 was very widely expected, because no one expected the Patriots to, shock them. But obviously with the issues off field and all the contract negotiations, this team is it's really just a full fade with the exception of Moss for me right now.
Yeah, and also some other information or little details that went on too was the fact that people were pointing out that Joe Burrow was holding his water bottle weirdly, saying that he was like flexing his wrist too much and oh, he's still injured, it's not fully healed. And then he went into the presser and said, "No, I'm just drinking water. Why are you guys complaining about that?" So many little intricacies going in to these Bengals where it kind of really feels like they're just beating themselves. Obviously, when you're coming out of surgery, you're going to keep stretching your wrist on the sideline, keeping it loose. So I don't know. Bengals are in a tough situation right now. We'll have to see how this goes a little bit further. But I think the fact that, they had a tight end fumble on the goal line just explains exactly how that matchup in week 1 went.
So just want to remind everybody, this is Injury Report Live. We're going to be going live every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can watch on YouTube. You can watch on X/Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call that. I call it Twitter. We'll always call it Twitter. But if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment in the chat. If you have a question that we want to you want answer, we'll do our best. So drop that in there. We'll get to you. You can also drop it on Twitter as well at SBuchanan24, at MTownsley, 2 Ys. On Megan Townsley at the end. So make sure to get that there. Don't message the other Megan Townsley. She's not going to answer. So make sure to do that too as well. Let's talk about a team that's feels like the season's over already because of all the injuries they have. Can you guess who it's going to be? Can you guess the team we're going to go to?
I really hope you're not going to say the Green Bay Packers. Is that where you're going?
No. Well, I mean, they fit the mold, to be fair. But I was going to the Rams because the Rams have a brash of injuries already as well, and no bigger than Puka Nacua already going on the IL. Obviously, one of the first-round picks if you are drafting your for your fantasy team, late first-round pick, down already. Good. Obviously, this is good news for Cooper Kupp. 21 targets did he have last week?
21. 14 receptions, 21 targets.
Talk about a condensed offense there, but 14 receptions in that one. Over under for this week, 86.5 yards for him. It's really going to be Cooper Kupp. It's going to be Kyren Williams, who had 18 carries last week as well. I mean, to talk about how thin the Rams receivers are once you get past Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I believe the wide receiver 2 for this week is going to be old pal Demarcus Robinson, who is going to be your wide receiver 2 coming into this week. But the surprising thing is at least from a betting perspective, this is basically a coin flip. It's the Cardinals -1 on the spread here. I was a little bit surprised like that. Did you not like what you saw from the Cardinals last week? Did you have a feeling one way or another?
I was honestly impressed with what the Cardinals were able to put up against the Bills. Yeah, I was. But I mean, going into this matchup, originally I kind of thought the line would be more in favor of the Rams until we kind of see all those injuries go. But Cardinals being favorited just by 1 point, I don't know about that. It's kind of like you said, it is a toss up. Excuse me, but let's go into kind of more of the injuries on the Rams side, more than just Puka Nacua. Their offensive line is just completely dismantled right now. I mean, halfway through the game last week or Sunday night against the Lions, they were only playing with 2 starting O linemen. So Joe Noteboom and Steve Avila, they are both also on the IR with Puka Nacua out for 4 weeks. There's 2 ways this could go. Either the pass rush kind of gets to Matt Stafford, but he's not really a guy that gets really tangled up in that kind of situation. He is good under pressure. He's going to get the ball out. This team is smart. Sean McVay is smart. They're going to get the ball out. I mean, that just skyrockets, Cooper Kupp's stock pretty much. Yep. So the only guy I really like, if you're talking daily fantasy, is Cooper Kupp. He is one of the most expensive, but you're paying for a guy that is obviously going to get the volume. Kyren, I'm not so positive on. Do you think that this would be a good spot for him too?
I don't hate it, but I'd say, for me, I'm just worried about if this game gets out of hand because it just feels like the Cardinals, despite what the spread is looking like right now, it just kind of feels like this is the spot where I think the Cardinals are just going to kind of run away with that. Now, at least Kyren Williams, can do a little bit of everything. He's, returning punts. He can catch out of the backfield. He's going to be, aside from Cooper Kupp, he's going to be the one that's going to be getting all the volume here. But I don't have much faith in the Rams this week here as well. And just kind of go off your point there too about Stafford playing well under pressure too as well. Last season under pressure on 34% of his dropbacks, still had 6.2 yards per pass attempt, only a 44% completion rate, which is, obviously understandable, but adjusted completion rate actually close to 60%. So you're right. He doesn't really kind of get like somebody like Jared Goff's a good example. When you start getting pressure on Jared Goff, like he just absolutely falls into a puddle of mud here at this point. Stafford is kind of the opposite here, does perform well under pressure, but obviously if we can avoid that, that would be great. But with the injuries that they have here, the Cardinals aren't the best pass rushing team, to be fair. I don't know how much pressure he's going to be realistically under overall. But I do think that I would be taking the Cardinals first and foremost. If you're betting this game, the Cardinals are going to end up being probably one of my favorite plays this week with how the lines are set, but probably just Kupp. Kyron Williams is the only way I'd be looking at this Rams team, but really other than that, it gets very thin very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, now let me, just because I have to bring up the Jordan Love debacle. I have to, because Matt
Is it
LaFleur,
weird they haven't officially ruled him out yet? That's kind of weird.
They should have ruled him out that night. I mean, you make a statement saying, oh, about 4 to 6 weeks, MCL sprain. Thank goodness it's not an ACL. But why even play these mind games with the door still open? And that was on Monday. Yeah. And now we're on Friday and he's still not officially ruled out. He didn't practice today. I mean, why are, like, what's the strategy there? I don't really know. It seems to me, I'm about 90% sure that we're going to see Malik Willis under center, which I'm not too excited about. But I mean, at least Jordan Love is not ruled out for the season. We also have a new addition to the injury report for the Packers, but Jayden Reed was limited in practice today as well. That's not the best news because he had an insane game last year. I think he had a 70-yard touchdown run, 2 touchdowns in that game. He really has been the go-to guy in the slot for the Packers in game 1, and then also last season for a team that doesn't have a clear wide receiver 1. I mean, you throw in a mix of Wicks, Malik Keith, of course, Christian Watson. You don't really know who's going to be the first one getting the targets there. I would normally say Jayden Reed is my guy. Play him. Take his I love Jayden Reed. I really do. But Malik Willis has never scored a touchdown in the NFL. He has 0 NFL touchdowns. His career completion percentage is 52.2%. I just don't think you can play any of these Packers receivers, even though they're not very expensive. And Christian Watson is just $5,000. Jayden Reed is $6,000 on DraftKings. I just don't think you can play any of these guys here. What do you think?
I mean, my favorite play, if he plays, would end up being Josh Jacobs. That would be the play for me here, because I feel like that's going to just be an easy target for Malik Willis here, because I think they're going to try to run the ball as much as they can, because obviously Willis is someone who can run the ball, obviously too as well. And that's kind of where, the Colts are having some issues, very early in the season at this point. So I really am watching the running back room for the Packers. I think that's really kind of where my attention is going to be, because if Josh Jacobs can play, I think that's going to be the play here. But him and Lloyd, both are questionable coming to this one, which really just leaves Wilson at this point. That could really be the one here. But I cannot get over what we saw last week for Joe Mixon against the Colts. He absolutely shredded that defense last week. And that is not a Joe Mixon we have seen for years. It feels like he felt like he was dust with the Bengals in the past couple of years. Because I remember when he ended up, signing with Houston, I'm like, okay, it's a nice name to go along with some of the other names you have on this team. But, this is a team that's going to want to throw. They have a lot of capable receivers to do so. And he just shredded them last week. So if he can shred them, Josh Jacobs can most certainly be able to do the same. So I am really hoping that Josh Jacobs is healthy for this game, because I think that could end up being one of the more primary targets for this one here. Also, over the middle of the field, just throw a name out there, Luke Musgrave, someone too as well. I love Luke Musgrave. I don't know why. He's just one of those guys I just have like an affection for. So maybe I'm just being a little biased here, but Musgrave, Josh Jacobs, I think those are 2 guys to really look at here. 3,400 for Musgrave here this week. Only 2 targets last week. Didn't catch either of them. That's okay. It's just getting warmed up. It's week 1. Don't judge me on one game. Jacobs, Musgrave, I think those are the 2 guys I would look at for the Packers. Are you playing Willis at all if he ends up starting, which we're looking at?
Definitely not. That's going to be a no. It's going to be a no for me.
Yeah.
Not after, when looking up his stat line, the poor guy, they gave him a QBR when he played 1 snap and got sacked. His QBR is at 24 right now. I thought that was hilarious when looking up his stats. But I want to throw another guy on your radar, actually, Tucker Kraft, who last year was the tight end 2, but stepped in for Luke Musgrave when he had, I forgot what the specific science terminology is, but lacerated kidney, I believe. So Tucker Kraft filled in that spot. Did I get that right? That's 2
Yeah.
points for me today. There we go. But Tucker Kraft actually played about 75 to 25, give or take a few percentages there of the snaps over Luke Musgrave. And Luke Musgrave was only on the field when there were 2 tight ends. So you
Yep.
might start seeing a lot more Tucker Kraft, who is just going to be dirt cheap at 3,300, 2 receptions, 37 yards last week. So if you're kind of doing it a toss up, I like Kraft more than Musgrave.
And I'm completely pulling this out of the air, so don't quote me on this, but I feel like I saw that Kraft was also the preferred option when they were inside the 10 in the red zone, like amongst the tight ends. Like, I don't think Musgrave gets targeted a lot inside the red zone. He gets more of those, downfield ones. But I believe, and again, don't quote me on this, I believe Kraft was the preferred target in the red zone as well. So you might be onto something there. See, this is why it's good to have this discussion. We work it out here together. We don't even have to prepare for this. We just work this out and we get the answers here. Okay, let's move on to the Bears. Go over with us what we're looking at for the Bears injuries here, because there's a couple of big names that have popped up on the injury report.
Yes. Okay. Unfortunately, in a wide receiver core that was built for Caleb Williams, Keenan Allen with a heel injury and Rome Odunze with a knee injury are both questionable and have not practiced on Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not super positive about today. If they have Odunze's injury right now is listed as pain tolerance as well. Yep. Yeah, we're looking at, game time decision for those two. And this is really unfortunate for a Bears offense that did not perform well at all in week 1. Caleb Williams really went through the rookie ringer when it comes to being the quarterback starting in his first game under center. It was a complete just defensive takeover. Thank goodness that they were able to get those takeaways in the second half against the Titans. But this is just not looking like a good spot one for Caleb Williams, because he's only going to be leaning on DJ Moore. And if these two guys don't play, I just don't even think the Bears are going to really have a great chance in this matchup.
This is I'm not looking towards the Bears at all here. For anybody, regardless of if they play or not, we still have this, thought in our heads that obviously Keenan Allen is going to be this massive target monster and whatnot. But it's fair to say that like the Bears offense is pretty stacked, when fully healthy. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. And, obviously we saw a okay performance from Caleb Williams. Really, when you look at the score as is, it was like, oh, Williams probably had a pretty good game. Well, he really wasn't a part of all that scoring last week when they were playing against the Titans. So I think it's a little bit of a misconception here. So I think the Bears for me are just someone that I'm a team that I'm just going to completely be passing up here. Fairly good game total in this one. I think it's 45.5. But I think Houston is just going to roll in this one here. What we saw from the Texans and everything that we saw from them last week, they were just absolutely rolling. So I think that's going to continue here this week, and I will happily stay away from the Bears. Big injury here for another running back, which is with the Seattle Seahawks against the New England Patriots. And this one is pretty significant. This is one that I'm going to be monitoring because I said earlier in the show, Patriots have a very good secondary. The Patriots are going to be a team that is going to give opposing receivers fits, and probably the best way to, I don't want to say keep the Patriots off the field. You probably want them on the field, actually. But one of the best ways to beat the Patriots is going to be on the ground. So Kenneth Walker popped up with a oblique injury. It looks like he has a lot of core injuries, by the way. I think I read somewhere this is like his 4th or 5th core injury since he entered the league, which seems like a lot and something you should probably get checked out. But Kenneth Walker going up against the Patriots here is one that's going to be we have to watch. The only downfall to this, if Kenneth Walker does not play, he's 6,300 this week. Zach Charbonnet is only 5,800. You're not getting a big significant discount with the RB2 stepping into that potential RB1 role. So not exactly a huge value play, but if we see what we saw last week, and I expect that we will see this again, Seattle ran the ball at one of the highest rates last week in week 1, 55% of the time. And we saw some good running for Cincinnati last week, 32 total carries, 138 yards, and that touchdown there. So I think if Walker is out, I think Zach Charbonnet is one of the better mid-tier guys that you can get, but I think Walker as well, if he does play, I'd be looking towards him as well against a defense that is going to allow yards on the ground.
I just don't like Charbonnet. Like I'm not a huge fan of him. It's personal, actually. That's a story for a different time. No,
oh,
I'm just kidding. Looking at his stats from last season, I mean, he didn't really produce just as much as kind of the hype that he's had around him. He
Sure.
only had 1 touchdown
Yeah.
last year, and going against a Patriots defense that, I mean, you have a guy or excuse me, I was about to say, I almost said Judon. That's not right. No, he's on the Falcons now.
Right.
But I mean, they were able to shut down the Bengals run game last week. I think they only had 70 yards on the ground. I don't like the either running back in this matchup, honestly. Nor, DK is probably going to be going up against Christian Gonzalez, who I think had 20. He was on Jamar Chase about 20 times against the
Yeah.
Bengals last week. I think I'm just fading the Seattle Seahawks altogether in this matchup. I'm not liking it.
I would just say for me, in that kind of zone of like the mid 5K range, there aren't a lot of great options. Obviously Gus Edwards is there, J.K. Dobbins is there, but that's where the ownership is really going to be condensing around those two guys. Like in a tournament play, I think Charbonnet, if he does end up being the running back one in this matchup, I think that's a way definitely to go to. Moss is in there too as well, but it's guys like, Austin Eckler, White over with the Raiders, Singletary, like not guys that I'm looking to put in my lineup as surefire, plays this week. So I think at least for where he's priced, while I would have liked a little bit more discount on his pricing, I think he's in a fair spot here going against the Patriots, because I really do think Geno Smith is going to have trouble getting the ball to DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba. There's really no matchup you can exploit with that Patriots secondary as it's set right now.
That's very fair. Yeah, no, I understand your point there. And also just for sportsbook purposes, if Kenneth Walker does not play, you can get Charbonnet at just plus 135 anytime touchdown score as well.
Yep.
And you can probably count on him for those goal line vulture scores. But okay, let's take it to a guy who I was very high up on last season, Josh Downs, who was a full participant in practice today, a guy who was just 4,800 on DraftKings for daily fantasy. This is pretty big. I feel like this is pretty big because he is a guy that has been very consistent, I would say. And for someone like Anthony Richardson, who has the giant arm, I mean that 70-yard bomb to Alec Pierce could be in conversation for the best throw of the year in week 1. That was amazing to see. But even though Richardson can do these kind of crazy Josh Allen-esque kind of plays, his QBR is still pretty low. I mean, he's not completing a lot of his high percentage of his passes. So you get someone like Josh Downs in the slot that can kind of be a safety net for him. If Josh Downs does play, I think I would like him against Green Bay.
I would like him not to play because I like the big downfield ability that he has with guys like Pierce and Mitchell. Like that was like, here's the thing with Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce do you remember Andy Isabella when he was with like the Cardinals or whatever? He was
definitely.
like, he would be on the field for like 3 or 4 total plays, but he would end up having like 200 air yards by the time his game was over. Like Alec Pierce is that guy. And he saw 2 huge targets there. Mitchell as well saw 2 targets of 20 yards or more. And that was the thing. When Richardson was, really at his best, it was really those deep downfield shots. Because I think off the top of my head, I only think he threw the ball like 19 times. Yeah, 19. He was only 9 for 19 in that game, which is actually I was a little bit surprised about too, because you obviously are assuming that Indy does not want him rushing the ball a ton, but he still did so 6 times for 56 yards in that touchdown. So it really kind of saved his day from a fantasy perspective. But Downs is fine, but I personally like Alec Pierce a lot. I wish he could get involved more because he is like that massive down play threat. And if Downs is active, then obviously that takes away from a lot of what Alec Pierce can do. But all those guys are very affordable, no matter what it ends up being. There's Michael Pittman, who's in the high 6K range, and then the whole rest of the crew after that in like that 4 to 5K range. Even Doolin, I think, is down to 3,200, but I don't expect him to be a much of a factor, regardless if the Downs is in or not. But I like the Colts a lot this week. I really got to say, because that Green Bay secondary, not to pile on you and everything that's been going on,
Let me hear it.
The Packers secondary is probably one of the things that we're not talking about a lot right now, but I think is going to be a big problem for the Packers down the line. And I think that, while Richardson isn't the best passer or anything like that, and that's not what he's known for, he's going to be able to pick apart, I think, this Packers secondary this week, especially when you consider the quarterback play or lack of quarterback play we're expecting from the Packers this week with Malik Willis.
It pains me to say it, but I agree with you in the fact that one of the Packers' biggest weaknesses is their secondary, and that's something that they made a note of to strengthen in the offseason, getting Xavier McKinney from the Giants, who, had a pick against Jalen Hurts, who did not play a very good game in week 1. It just that they do have more things they need to work on. I mean, Corey Ballantyne is also on the injury list as well, or I think he's questionable, I believe, for this week. And then linebacker Quay Walker. So they do have just more issues on their on the defensive side of the ball. I will say, if you were thinking about playing Anthony Richardson's in daily fantasy, 6,800 is what he's priced at. You will get those big splash plays, but you have two ball hawks and Jair Alexander and Xavier McKinney who are looking to get those interceptions on a guy like Richardson who will throw dangerous balls. So be careful there when you're thinking about that. Obviously, interceptions are just a little bit less, but that's kind of where my brain's going. It's okay. We saw the ball hawks last week. How is that going to play over in this matchup?
Richardson did end up being one of the highest owned quarterbacks of the week. This week, he's down in single digits because right now, when you're looking at quarterbacks and potential ownership, Patrick Mahomes and Jaden Daniels are looking like two of the more popular plays. So if you faded Anthony Richardson last week, want him a little bit of a, like a leverage play, I think Richardson could be that, because again, one of the reasons why I wasn't looking to play him last week is I really did not think they were going to let him run the ball a lot. I thought they were going to kind of ease him back into game action. The carries were going to be limited, and I guess 6 carries you could consider as limited, but he did some big damage on those carries when he had the ball, and it obviously shows why he is the talent that he is and rushing in for that touchdown. So I'm all in on Richardson this week. I think he's one of my favorite quarterback plays of the week, and someone I will be looking to be using in my lineups. One defensive injury I do want to get to, and it's one that we're going to have to watch. But Marshawn Lattimore is in jeopardy of missing this game this week and going up against the Dallas Cowboys. So if he does miss this game, the floodgates are open for CeeDee Lamb, and that's a dangerous thing. When you look at projected ownership, CeeDee Lamb is down the list, and I was kind of shocked about that. To be fair, CeeDee Lamb is the most expensive player on this slate overall. He's $100 more than Christian McCaffrey, so CeeDee Lamb is going to be hard to get into that lineup. But if Marshawn Lattimore does end up being ruled out, I cannot fathom, or I cannot even think of a situation where I'm not putting CeeDee Lamb into my lineups with, going against the B squad secondary for the Saints. And if we see anything like we did from Derek Carr last week, when he was just a madman in that first half, this could be a nice little back and forth between these teams. So stay tuned for that Marshawn Lattimore news, but I think we're going to see a much better line than we saw last week with 5 catches for 61 yards from CeeDee Lamb last week.
Definitely. And I mean, a guy that just got paid, so he's finally excited and happy to be out there, you would hope. But also another injury on the secondary is safety Tyrann Mathieu, also questionable with a heel injury too. So the Saints DBs are not doing very well right now. But I want to put this on y'all's radar. CeeDee Lamb had the most in the league red zone targets last year, over 10 yards. He had 31 red zone targets, but also the guy who was let me double check my notes, the 5th most red zone targets in the league, Jake Ferguson, who is dealing with, I believe, an MCL sprain right now. Yes, MCL sprain right now, 23 red zone targets inside the 20 last year. So if he plays or he's limited at all, that's just even more food for CeeDee to feast on. But also Brandon Cooks as well, who did have a touchdown last week. So if you don't want to spend the money on CeeDee Lamb because he is so expensive on this slate, go with a guy like Brandon Cooks, who will get some targets, especially if Ferguson is limited. And he had a touchdown last week. He was very good in the red zone last season. So I do like Cooks here. He's just 5,600. But I mean, obviously CeeDee is going to be the first choice. He's going to feast. I feel like CeeDee is going to feast.
Yeah, and this game total has been moving a bit. A couple of days ago, it was down to 45 points. It peaked at 47 yesterday, now down to 46.5. I would expect that if we get, that Lattimore news, maybe another half point or so to get that back up to 47. But I would not be surprised if this ends up being one of the more sneaky shootouts of the week. Obviously, 46.5 point total is not low by any stretch of the means. But I do think that this could end up being one of, if not potentially the highest scoring game of the week right now, at least game total wise. That is expected to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Detroit Lions. But right now, I think that is definitely one to watch there for the Cowboys and Saints. I feel like we have hit on almost everyone that we wanted to hit on, unless I am mistaken, and there was someone that we haven't got to yet.
The only news that I kind of want to drop in there is the fact that the Titans did not list a single person on the injury report, and they're all good to go. So D-Hop said, yeah, we're gonna slow clap for that. D-Hop, he's in. I mean, are we ever going to see this again? I don't know. Maybe not, but I'll guess a little shout out to the Titans right there. That and also just incoming news.
Oh,
The Packers are listing Jordan Love as questionable, not even doubtful. Is there even a chance that he play? I don't know. Is there even a chance that he plays? Now I'm getting frustrated. I want to know, obviously.
legitimately, how would you feel if he ends up being active? As a fan, I don't want your fantasy analysis. I don't want betting
Okay.
analysis. I want your reaction if he's active and plays on Sunday.
Complete bias. I would be upset because there's no need to rush in this guy in week 2.
Yeah.
Yes, we're already down 0-1, but you
Yep.
have the weapons with you. Your defense can hold it together. Even if we do go down 0-2, give him extra time to rest. There's no need to play him in this game. That's my biased opinion on this.
Yeah. I just think it's kind of crazy. You shell out all that money for the contract. You know, it's very, very early in the season. Obviously, every win matters at this point. You don't want to quickly go down 0-2, but there is just no point because here's what I worry about. They trot him out there, doesn't feel good, gets hit, re-aggravated or even worse. Like you're just playing with fire here, and I don't agree with it at all. I would say if being we're a sports book or whatever, I would guess that he is not going to play. I would put money down that he is not going to play. Maybe this is just more of a formality, but it's kind of concerning that is questionable because when they said he's not going to go on IR, I was like, oh, cool. Maybe it'll be like a 2-week thing, maybe a 3-week thing, fine. But now that we got the questionable heading into week 2, I don't know. It's very strange. It is very, very strange, but still a couple days to get through this. Next 36 hours will be very telling for sure. But for your sake, at least, I hope when we see him on Sunday, he's in street clothes, he's got the fancy earpiece in, and he's holding a clipboard. I think that's what we need to see from Jordan Love in week 2. All right, I think that is going to wrap it up for our inaugural debut episode of Injury Report Live. Like I mentioned, we will be here every Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, to answer your questions, go over all the injury news and highlights for the week. Megan Townsend, I am Steve Buchanan. We will see you right back here on Friday.